There are many secret codes that we still can't crack. It's time to explore books of ancient magic, the dollar bill's enigmatic secrets, and a language that may not even be real. Secrets of the dollar bill. Did you know that you can track your dollar bill? There's a site called Where's George, where you can punch in the serial number of any dollar bill and see where it's been throughout its life. Did you also know the dollar bill is covered in more secrets and symbols than you can imagine? There are so many hidden meanings on this rectangular piece of paper that it's tough to know where to start. There's a pyramid, an all-seeing eye, and the number 13 numerous times. There are 13 arrows in the eagle's left talon, there are 13 stripes on the Great Seal, and there are 13 steps on the pyramid. There's also a bit of Latin connecting the dollar bill to ancient Rome. Above the pyramid is Annuit Copetis, which means Providence has favored our undertakings. The Latin script underneath the pyramid says Novus Ordo Seclorum. This means a new order of the ages. Some say the Latin refers to the creation of the United States as a country. Others believe it hints at the conspiracy theory of the New World Order. A lot of the symbolism almost didn't even make it onto the dollar bill. Benjamin Franklin himself fought against putting the bald eagle on the bill because he didn't want it as the national bird. Benjamin Franklin thought the eagle had bad moral character. Both he and Thomas Jefferson wanted to put an Egyptian pharaoh on the dollar bill. Imagine if instead of an eagle, an Egyptian pharaoh was the symbol of the United States of America. Maybe one of the weirdest things on the bill is in the top right corner, but you won't see it without a magnifying glass. Just next to the left of the very top of the one is a creature. Nobody knows if it's an owl or a spider, but it's definitely an animal. There are a lot of other unknowns when it comes to the bill. For example, if you connect the A in Annuit and the S in Coptis with the O in Ordo, you have an upside-down triangle. The outline of the triangle against the outline of the pyramid creates a six-pointed star. It might be a coincidence, or it could be meant to mean something. There is also a ghost on the dollar bill. If you scrutinize the fourth row of the pyramid on the back of the dollar, there is what unmistakably looks like a smiling face. Nobody knows if it was designed on purpose or who the smiling ghost might be. Another thing nobody knows is where the actual dollar sign came from. Many have suggested it originated from the ancient symbol the caduceus, which is a snake curving around a cross. The caduceus was wielded by the Roman god Mercury. Even the word dollar is believed to come from the Roman word denari. Another hint that the USA is a continuation of the Roman Empire. The Drur Code. The Drur Code is not a secret batch of symbols or some indiscernible codex. The Drur Code was the code of ethics and principles followed by the Vikings. From the 8th until the 11th century, Vikings lived and died by this code. It was all about being brave, loyal, and honorable. Living by the code meant Vikings needed to live a life of boldness, adventure, and courage. While it was mostly passed down through word of mouth, there are a few ancient texts providing insight into the Vikings' code of morality. The only real written information about the code comes from the Old Norse sagas of the 13th and 14th centuries. The sagas are a bit dubious because they were written long after the Vikings were gone by their descendants in Iceland. Scholars doubt how much of the sagas are factual, but the Drur Code shows up frequently enough that it was probably something the Vikings really believed in. So what did the code say? Bravery was at the number one spot. Bravery was seen as a virtue and a duty. Every Viking was encouraged to be their own hero. The best thing they could do with their life was to go out in pursuit of glory. They had to defend their loved ones, be hospitable to their neighbors, and fight with valor. This code became such an ingrained part of Viking society that it contributed to their legendary status as warriors. Vikings believed only by following the code and fighting without fear would they go to Valhalla when they died. The Sumerian Sacred Code. A sacred code from ancient Sumer has been deciphered for the first time. The deciphered code has revealed an unusual connection between the Sumerians in Iraq 4,000 years ago and the Bible. The code was not in a book or on a clay tablet. It was found inscribed on a statue of an ancient leader named Gudea. Archaeologists with the British Museum say the statue was uncovered in the forgotten city of Girzu, one of the very first human cities ever constructed. It was pulled from the ruins of a grand temple. Upon the statue is an architectural plan and an inscription involving Gudea. The inscription says Gudea built the temple because it was commanded to him in a dream. The inscription wasn't the hard part to decipher. It took researchers 140 years to crack the architectural plan drawn on the statue. It turns out the plan is an exact diagram, a true scale representation of the temple in which it was found. Dr. Sebastian Ray with the British Museum compared the diagram to the precise measurements in the Bible detailing the Temple of Solomon. This is an amazing discovery for one big reason. It shows that the Sumerians had an unparalleled understanding of mathematics. They were able to scale models up and down. King Gudea came up with the idea for the temple, and his architects came up with a precise blueprint for the temple before they ever built it. They had the same skills that modern architects have today. However, math to the Sumerians was a sacred thing. This diagram etched in stone would have been a holy code to them. The Secret Journal. New information has just been discovered about the UFO crash in Roswell. I'm talking about the big crash, the 1947 one, in which the Army supposedly recovered a spaceship and extraterrestrial bodies. The new information comes from a secret journal belonging to a U.S. intelligence officer. The officer was Major Jesse Marcel. In July 1947, Jesse was sent to supervise the collection of debris in Roswell, New Mexico. Something impacted the ground, and Jesse was sent to clean it up. A press officer issued an official statement in July saying a flying disc had crashed and was recovered. This was immediately interpreted as alien contact. The next day, the story changed to a weather balloon instead of a flying saucer. It was the beginning of a century of obsession. There's even a picture of Jesse from 1947 posing with what looks like a shredded weather balloon. Nobody knows if the picture was staged after the fact to make their story of a weather balloon seem more legit. But now, Jesse's family has revealed that his diary from over 70 years ago could back up the idea that it was aliens who crashed. The mysterious journal is currently held by Jesse's grandchildren, though it should be noted that Jesse was already starting to pull away the curtain in the 1990s. In 1997, The Times reported that Jesse believed the crashed object had extraterrestrial origins. In his diary are passages written in extremely cryptic language. The diary has yet to be deciphered and is still in control of his family. It's not clear why they haven't handed it over to experts yet. In any case, the family believes that Jesse's cryptic writing was his way of concealing the shocking truth of what he knew happened that day in the desert. The Dispilio Tablet. Archaeologists claim that humans didn't invent the written word until around 4000 BC in ancient Sumer. But there is an artifact known as the Dispilio Tablet that proves archaeologists are wrong. This artifact was found in Macedonia in 1993. Upon its surface are the incredible written words of prehistoric people 8,000 years ago. It's considered the oldest known written text, but archaeologists refuse to talk about it. It's like they've buried their heads in the sand on purpose. For the past 30 years, the tablet has remained an untouchable and indecipherable enigma. It was uncovered in the ruins of a Neolithic lake settlement not far from Castoria. The settlement was occupied by a group of people considered primitive by modern anthropologists. Found along with the mysterious tablet were a handful of other Stone Age artifacts. There is no doubt the people who created the tablet were hunter-gatherers, perhaps practicing an early form of agriculture too. They may have also been keeping animals, but nobody knows. The important part is that they had a written language 2,000 years before scientists say language was transcribed into writing by the Sumerians. Why is the archaeological community so stubborn? This is a real artifact with what could be the first letters ever written, but it is considered an out-of-place artifact. Maybe it's because nobody can decipher the thing, so experts don't want to try. Or maybe it's a hoax. Unless a new Rosetta Stone from the Stone Age is found, it's unlikely the code will ever be cracked. Pepys' Secret Journal. Barely anyone alive today knows the name Samuel Pepys, but in the 17th century he was a hugely important person. He was an English naval administrator serving in the Royal Navy. He also became a member of parliament near the end of his life. He had many great achievements in his life, but what he is most famous for today is his mysterious diary. It's believed that inside his diary are coded secrets that nobody can decipher. Samuel had a long and adventurous life. When he was only 17 years old, he went on great voyages across the sea. He rose through the ranks and miraculously survived the Great Plague of 1665. In 1673, Samuel was promoted to be the secretary of the Admiralty Commission. He continued working for Parliament up until his death in 1703. He left behind a diary that he had been writing for 40 years prior to his death. The diary contains detailed descriptions of all the most important events that happened in England during the end of the 17th century. Everything from the defeat of Oliver Cromwell to the exile of Charles II. He also detailed much of his daily life, mundane things like going to the theater and his personal finances. Everything he wrote down was written in code. Samuel didn't think people would ever read his diary. He wrote it in a special shorthand, in a mixture of Spanish, French, and Italian. His diary was given to the University of Cambridge, where specialists had no problem cracking the code wide open. His diary doesn't contain any secrets to the origins of life. Rather, it's an incredible look into the life of a man who lived almost 400 years ago. He wrote it in code because within his diary are accounts of his shameful vices and secrets. He talks about his affairs, his insecurities, and his personal troubles. These days, it's considered one of the most bare-bone, honest literary works in history. The Copiale Cipher. In 1970, a very unusual manuscript was discovered hiding in a library in East Germany. The manuscript was written in a secret code that could not initially be deciphered. The document was forgotten, eventually passing into the hands of a private collector. It wasn't until 2011 that the collector handed this strange manuscript to an international team of scholars. They named the manuscript the Copiale Cipher. It took them 6 months to crack the code. Researchers were shocked to see that the mysterious book from unknown origins contained Masonic rituals from the 18th century. The book itself is a beautiful piece of literature, bound in green and gold with 105 pages. It was written using 90 unique characters. These included glyphs, Roman letters, Greek characters, and abstract symbols. There also weren't any word spaces, which made breaking the code quite the challenge. But what about the ritual? The translation isn't 100% complete, so scholars don't know what it said verbatim. But they did decode passages talking about drawing symbols with chalk and then erasing the chalk after the ritual. There is mention of 7 steps and a circular staircase, something about jewels, and an obsession with eye surgery. But there is one passage at the end that really stands out. It was deciphered as saying something along the lines of, "The three-headed monster government deprives man of his natural freedom and enjoyment of the timely things that human beings need." There is no true revelation of what the ritual was trying to accomplish, but it definitely had something to do with German Freemasons. The Book of Secret Magic. There is an occult grimoire that claims to hold secret truths and esoteric wisdom beyond your wildest imagination. Some have called it a spiritual manual for the secrets of the divine. Others believe it little more than a work of fiction. The Sun of Knowledge, also called Shams al-Ma'arif, contains magical spells, rituals, and even ways for you to communicate with supernatural beings. Let's start with the history of this secret book. I say secret, but obviously it isn't if I'm talking about it. It's more that the truths written upon its pages are coded in such a way that no ordinary reader can discern them. It was written in Arabic in the 13th century, between 600 and 700 years ago. The name of the author is unknown. It was almost certainly written by a scholar of Sufi mysticism, a spiritual offshoot of traditional Islam. The author wrote this book as a way to guide people into having a real connection with the divine, be it God or any other heavenly entity. Sufi Muslims have always placed a very strong emphasis on mystical teaching. Part of their tradition is that the Islamic holy texts, such as the Quran, are not straightforward pieces of work. Rather, the Sufi believe the religious books of Islam hold secret meanings that can only be decoded by analyzing each and every word. The Sufi have been doing such analysis for centuries. The Sun of Knowledge is a direct result of that study. Without giving too much of the book away, I'll let you know what you can expect inside its pages. Detailed instructions on how to communicate with genies, angels, and spirits, how to use magical squares and certain combinations of numbers and letters to produce magical effects, how to make talismans, charms, and amulets, and of course, in traditional 13th century style, how to help grow your crops and find true love. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The Zimmerman telegram. During times of war, messages are often sent in code to prevent the enemy from finding out about secret plans. Spies are everywhere, and if the message is ever decoded by an unintended recipient, it can change the course of history. And that's exactly what happened in 1917. The First World War was raging, having engulfed much of Europe and beyond. At the beginning of the year, America was yet to get involved, but the Allies were convincing them to join the fight and finish the war as soon as possible. At the time, though, the U.S. government was staying neutral, even facilitating the transfer of German messages across the Atlantic to prevent the Brits from intercepting them. This was until the British Secret Service got their hands on what is now known as the Zimmerman telegram. They decoded it quickly enough that they could read it 2 days before it reached its destination, and it detailed a proposal by the Germans to Mexico, asking them to join the war against the US, and in return they would be given Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. It was politically difficult for the British to show this evidence to American authorities because it proved that they had been spying on them, but eventually the truth was revealed to President Wilson and leaked to the American press. By April of 1917, U.S. troops had joined the war, and the rest is history. The Battle of Midway. The Battle of Midway, which took place between the 4th and 7th of June 1942, was one of the American military's biggest victories over the Japanese Navy during the Second World War. In this battle, over 3,000 Japanese sailors lost their lives, and 4 aircraft carriers were destroyed, while the Americans lost 300 sailors and 1 carrier. It could have all been different, though, had U.S. cryptographers not intercepted and decoded Japanese transmissions. In 1921, the Office of Naval Intelligence came into the possession of a copy of the Japanese Navy's secret codebook, and analysts worked tirelessly to understand how it all worked. Despite changes in the code over the years and the introduction of a new system called JN25B in 1939, the principles remained more or less the same. By 1942, it's thought that the U.S. Navy could decode about 10 to 15% of transmissions that were intercepted. Might not sound like much, but in some cases, it helped change the outcome. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough to preempt the attack on Pearl Harbor, but it did inform them of a new attack being planned on a place referred to as AF. It wasn't clear where this site was, though, but suspecting that it was the military base on Midway Island, officers sent a fake message from the outpost saying that their water purification system had broken. As soon as a Japanese message was intercepted that mentioned AF had issues with water, the location was confirmed, and U.S. troops were able to prepare and effectively repel the attack. The Babington Plot. The Babington Plot was an attempt in 1586 to assassinate Queen Elizabeth I, Protestant daughter of King Henry VIII. The goal was to replace her on the throne with Mary, Queen of Scots, who was her Roman Catholic cousin. On July 6 that year, Anthony Babington, encouraged by support from abroad, mostly Spain, wrote a long letter to Mary, who at the time was already in prison. She was enough of a threat that Queen Elizabeth kept her under arrest and as isolated as possible. There were others who also wanted a Catholic on the throne, and Babington often sent letters to Mary in code. He and others were going to rescue her and ask for her permission for the dispatch of the usurping competitor, which meant the plan to assassinate the queen. Mary replied a week later to give her approval, but despite both letters being coded, they were intercepted and read by Thomas Phillips, who informed Queen Elizabeth. Not coded well enough, it seems. Within days, Babington and his allies were arrested and taken to the Tower of London, with 7 of them being dragged to St. Giles Fields and executed on the 20th of September. Mary was herself put on trial, and despite protesting her innocence, Elizabeth signed her death warrant on February 1, 1587, and she was beheaded in the Great Hall of Fotheringay the following week. Olivier Levasseur. According to legend, the notorious French pirate Olivier Levasseur managed to acquire a huge fortune during his piracy across the Caribbean and West Africa, most notably in 1721, when he and his crew captured a Portuguese treasure ship that had become grounded on a sandbar during a storm, an act that is said to be one of the greatest paydays in the history of piracy. Unsurprisingly, with such success came the attention of the authorities, and Levasseur was caught in the Seychelles in 1730 and hanged for piracy. So the story goes, as the noose was around his neck, he threw a cryptogram into the crowd and said whoever deciphered it would find his treasure. The supposed cryptogram has been studied ever since, and a number of people have dedicated their lives to finding the treasure. It seems, though, that it may have all been a ruse. There are 2 different copies still in existence. One of them has been proved to be a fake, and the other, which has now been deciphered, doesn't relate to anything to do with the pirate or treasure. Maybe a true copy of the cryptogram still exists, though, and some think that the treasure could still be out there. Poes challenge. Edgar Allan Poe was a renowned writer and poet known for his stories of mystery, but he was also fascinated with ciphers and codes. He even wrote a story, The Gold Bug, about the solution to one. In 1840, he wrote an article for Graham's magazine called A Few Words on Secret Writing, in which he invited readers to send him coded messages for him to decipher, offering a free subscription for ones that he couldn't crack. 6 months later, he wrote again that he had solved 100 entries that had been sent in, and then published 2 more to end the contest. While he said that these 2 were sent in, there were many that believed that he created them himself. It took until 1992 until the first was cracked, and the University of Illinois professor who managed it offered a $2,500 prize to whoever could solve the second. Finally, in July of 2000, a software engineer from Toronto successfully managed it. He found that the lines had been encrypted with a polyalphabetic substitution cipher, which used 6 different symbols for each letter. It said, "It was early spring, warm and sultry glowed the afternoon. The very breezes seemed to share the delicious languor of universal nature." See, totally worth it. Experts now don't think that Poe wrote this himself, so the solving of one mystery has opened up another. Linear B. In 1900, among the ruins of a Bronze Age palace in Knossos, Greece, archaeologists found a script that resembled nothing that had ever been seen before. Containing images of swords, chariots, and countless other small pictograms, this system of writing became known as Linear B and would prove to be a mystery for the following 50 years. Not only did researchers not know what words were written, but they had no idea who had written it and in what language it was. The truth was finally revealed in 1952 by an unassuming architect called Michael Ventris. He had read works by Alice Kober, who herself tried to understand the writing, and discovered that it was a very early form of Greek, written more than 500 years before the Greek alphabet was developed, and predating our knowledge of Hellenic peoples by a number of centuries. Thousands of tablets have now been found inscribed with the language, which uses more than 187 different symbols. It's thought to have only been used for administrative purposes by professional scribes, and once the society collapsed, there was just no use for it anymore. Frank Sidebottom. Frank Sidebottom was the papier-mâché-headed comedy persona of English musician Chris Seavey. Throughout his career in the 80s and 90s, he fronted TV and radio shows and even reported for the local news. He created numerous newsletters and writings over this time, too, and these were often accompanied by symbols around them, ones that people long suspected had a meaning, but they couldn't work out what it was. Recently, a filmmaker was researching for a new documentary about Frank Sidebottom and was speaking to Seavey's son. He revealed that his dad would fill in his rows of symbols first and then let the kids color in other rows to act as a red herring. This was the breakthrough he needed, and the filmmaker challenged the UK security services to help decipher the rest. They used it in a puzzle training exercise and found that the codes translated to the type of nonsensical phrases you'd expect from a comedian, including, "Why does my nose hurt after concerts?" in reference to the fact that he wore a clothes peg on his nose to create his character's voice. Copal Cipher. The Copal Cipher was created by John Francis Byrne in 1918 and was what he described as being unbreakable yet simple. So simple, in fact, that it only required 2 rotating discs that were small enough to fit into a cigar box and could be operated by a 10-year-old. He offered a cash reward to anyone who could crack it, but this is something that would never be claimed. Following his death, the Copal Cipher became even more of a mystery, and it was only in 2010 that its secrets were revealed. His son, the only other person to know the secret, died, and his wife donated all of his papers and artifacts to the National Cryptographic Museum. The Copal Cipher used 2 alphabet wheels, one used to find the letter you want to encrypt, and the other to show the corresponding cipher letter. The reason why it was so difficult to figure out is that the 2 alphabets would slightly alter every time a letter was input. This led to a highly diffused encryption, and one that would have been unlikely to be solved without the original apparatus. While it was a clever system to design, experts stressed that any error made would cumulatively alter further encryptions, which would have made it far too unreliable to be used in an important setting like war. The Copiale Cipher. Created in the 1730s, the Copiale Cipher is a 105-page manuscript that has baffled researchers ever since. That is, until 2011, when it was finally decoded. Consisting of 75,000 handwritten characters, including arrows, shapes, runes, math symbols, Roman letters, and Greek letters, there were only 2 examples of plain text in the entire book. Finally, though, researchers were able to reveal the secrets by using computer algorithms and could hardly believe what they found. It was a homophonic cipher that had a complex substitution code and turned out to be an encrypted German text from a secret society. Calling themselves the Oculists, they used sight as a metaphor for knowledge, and the first 16 pages detailed their initiation ceremony. At first, the candidate is asked to read a blank page. When saying they were unable to, they were given eyeglasses and had a number of eyebrow hairs plucked out. Their eyes were washed, their hands placed on an amulet, and then they were asked to read another piece of paper. And you guessed it, they were miraculously able to see the words. The Enigma Code. The Enigma was an enciphering machine used by the German armed forces during the Second World War to send secure messages. Early on, Polish mathematicians had figured out how to read these messages, but once the Germans realized this, they began to change the cipher system daily, making it virtually impossible to decipher. It fell to British researchers led by Alan Turing at Bletchley Park to carry out secret work into finding a way to accurately decipher the messages that were being intercepted. They developed a machine called the bomb with an E at the end, which means that from mid-1940, German Air Force signals were being routinely intercepted and helping inform the plans of the Allies. Turing also went on to help develop another system to intercept submarine communications, and his cryptographic techniques helped him develop one of the first computers. The meticulous work of Turing and fellow codebreakers is thought to have shortened the war by 2 or 3 years, something that only came to light when it was declassified in the 1990s, long after the deaths of most involved. Thanks for watching! Which code did you like the most? Let me know in the comments below. When I was a kid, I always tried to decipher the alphabet from the Disney movie Atlantis. Anyone else? Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!